I'm sure. I am so sure that we are joining you live right now. By the way, if you are local and you don't come in person, or if you're within driving distance and you don't come in person, you miss a great deal of what we do prior to going live. And so if you can at all possible get here, you might, just maybe, you might like some of the things we discuss before we get into the lesson. So we have been looking at the tribe of Zebulun, and it's kind of interesting because there are some things in the news today about certain countries that are very important in what is happening today. So if you begin to look a great deal into the Netherlands or Holland or the Dutch, and hear what's happening, they're in the news today. And we just happen to be studying the tribe of Zebulun, and much of Zebulun can be found in Holland today. So we are in note number 5. And that's on page 2, and if you're watching at home and you don't have the notes, if you will just look down where you're looking in the screen, you will see that you can download those notes. If for any reason you have no way to do that and you need notes, all you need to do is call the church number and we will get those out in the mail to you right away so you can have the notes. The Alans and Alamans are people groups of Elon, who is son of Zebulun. And as these groups migrated after their exile, they began to merge, and usually they would merge with one another. And so the Alans and Alamans merged with the Suebi of Issachar in Alsace. You've probably heard of Alsace, the area in France that borders Germany and Switzerland. So you're beginning to see that as they migrate, they begin to then group in people groups very similar to actually where they were all the way back in their land allotments in the land of Israel. So these descendants of Zebulun bordered Sidon. Now, they obviously bordered Sidon, the Sidon that we know in what is called the Holy Land. But at this time, when they were migrating, Sidon, Switzerland was known as Sidon. And so when they migrated then, they went into this area known as Sidon, and guess what? They landed and lived in an area that was called by the same name of another place that they lived close to in the Holy Land. Now, in early Scythian times, go back to Scythia because that's basically one of the first places they went when they began to migrate out of exile. In early Scythian times, the name of Zebulun could be seen in the name Zabulistan. That was the name of a place. Well, that makes sense, right? Because the tribes often stamped their names. They went into this is what this is called, and they called it after themselves. And so it was called Zabulistan, and this was an area to the south and southeast of Hara. Now we know that one of the first places that the tribes of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, were sent to was Hara and Habor. So we know that's where they were sent. It's listed in the Bible. That was one of the places they were sent to. And isn't it interesting that the tribe of Zebulun stamped their name on a location that was to the area south and southeast of Hara, which was still within that area to which they were exiled. And that, of course, is now in modern day Iran. I-R-A-N. I kind of feel that some of the Iranian people might get a real shock one of these days. You know, they're marching in the streets, death to Israel, death to Israel. And somebody someday is going to hold up a mirror to them. Say that again. Death to you in the mirror. Now, the name Zebulun is also found in the Sabalenoi people group in south Denmark. Okay? And northern Frisia, because now we know who are the Frisians. Well, the Frisians are a West German group living in northern Netherlands. In other words, when they went into Germany, into West Germany, and then they migrated from West Germany into the Netherlands. But their people group name was Sabalenoi, from Zebulun. And I don't know what happened here. That next name is not right, so I'm going to spell it to you. It's not S-B-A, it's S-A-B-A-L-I-N-G-O-I. Sabalingoi. And what happens is sometimes my computer doesn't think that's a word, and so it just tries to change it, and then I go back and try to change it, and then it does all kind of weird things. And so Sabalingoi in Hebrew means, guess what? People or nation. And remember, Goy, sometimes you'll see it G-O-Y, sometimes it's G-O-I. Depends on what language. So people or nation of Zebulun. That's what Sabalingoi is. Now, in dialects of the northern kingdom of Israel, remember they began, because of where they were located, they picked up different words in the languages of the peoples to whom they butted up against. And so in the dialects that we know were in the northern kingdom of Israel, Sabalun and Zebulun would have been alternate pronunciations of the same name. So if you would see Zadi and Aleph, you know, if you'd see those letters, the pronunciation would be the same. Okay? Zabulon or Zebulun. So it would have been the same name. Now the Sabalingoi were to the north of the Sigalones. Now this is going to be very interesting, because this people group also had a name in Hebrew, and that name in Hebrew meant chosen. C-H-O-S-E-N. Meant chosen ones. So the Sigalones said, we're the chosen ones. So they said, we may not know exactly who we are, but we know something. We're the chosen ones. And the Saxons. So they were north of the Sigalones, the chosen ones, and the Saxons. Now, to the north of the Sabalingoi were the Hali. And they were descendants of Jaleel. So now you're having another clan. And so Jaleel was also a son of Zebulun. This is very interesting, because you see Jaleel, you see that it has a J to it, but Jaleel is really Yakliel in Hebrew. And the Yah would have been dropped in the permutation of the name, but you can see, and who can already see what's in that name? Yah. Okay, Yah. Great is the God, Yah. So they have the name of God in their name. So Sered and Elon were also sons of Zebulun. So he had a lot of sons, and they then had people groups who arose out of them. From Denmark and Scandinavia, there were several waves of migration into the area of nearby Holland, especially into Frisia. Now, Holland is interesting in this sense. Modern Holland, or the Netherlands, has Frisians in the north. So that's the Frisians have gone there in the north. They have Saxons in the east, and Franks in the south. So you're seeing different people groups coming in there, family members, but they're in different areas. It also contains elements of French Huguenots. And how many remember who the French Huguenots were? They were French Christians. They'd come along, but at some point, what did they do? They became Christian. You also have Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews. Okay. Sephardic are Jews, Yehudahites, who are primarily from the Middle East, up in through Iberia. They're Jewish people who primarily settled in those areas, the Middle East, around the Mediterranean. And Ashkenazi Jews, primarily, those are the Jews who settled in Eastern Europe. Are there Ashkenazi Jews other places? Yes, but primarily in Eastern Europe. Malays, Arabs, and Eurasians. Those are all the people groups that have settled in Holland. So the population of, I don't know why that Holland. Yeah, it should just be the population of Holland is of mixed origins, like the population of most countries. However, a great portion of the people of the Netherlands is descended from Israelites, a great portion. Primarily, now are there members from other tribes? Yes, smatterings, there always will be. But primarily from the tribe of Zebulun. And please note that often groups of seeming divergent backgrounds converging in one location. In other words, well, this is a different people group, I know. But these are different people groups who grew from being descendants of different sons of a tribal ancestor. So even though they look like they're divergent people groups, they converge in one location. And when you look at them, whether you look at their culture, whether you look at their DNA, whether you look at their art, whether you look at their language, they are often revealed as having originally the same tribal identity. The same. And when we first started this, remember, we looked at archaeological evidence, we looked at culture evidence, we looked at art evidence. Now, why is it that you would have the same type of art, the same type of pottery, design of pottery, all the way back here, and all of a sudden, then you're way over here. You're in Holland, you're like, well, how do they get the same pottery forms and styles that you had all the way back here? Well, because they migrated, they took that style with them. Now, the Frisians are a people group now concentrated in northern Holland. That's where they are today. You can find the Frisian people group in northern Holland. But at one time, they were spread all along the coast from Scandinavia through Holland, Belgium, and France. Now this is what's kind of interesting, because remember I said they can be different and they can blend together and they can, because this is what's interesting. The name of the Frisians, even though we know that they were obviously a part of Zebulun, it was a part of the blended and identified and became a part of Zebulun. But the name of the Frisians is traceable to Perez, son of Gilead of Manasseh. Manasseh. Okay, so even though that name is there, somewhere along the line, they intermarried and then they kind of took over, because the actual inhabitants of present-day Frisia and Holland are more identifiable with the tribe of Zebulun. So obviously along the way, this group of people intermarried, and even though their name comes from Manasseh, this group are more identifiable to the tribe of Zebulun. Now, in biblical times, tribes such as Zebulun, Issachar, and Asher were closely associated with, guess what? Manasseh. Manasseh. So here you had Zebulun, and this is in biblical times when they were back in the land, in the northern kingdom of Israel. You had Zebulun, Issachar, and Asher, and they were closely related with Manasseh. Now, if you're close and you have a lot of interaction in Israel, in the northern kingdom of Israel, Samaria, the capital of Samaria, and then the enemy, the Assyrians, come down, they move you into exile, then you're going to look for what? You're going to look for people you were friends with, because you've been taken out of your land. You have been ripped apart from your culture. And when you understand your faith, this was a faith that was certainly land-based, and you're in a foreign land, so what are you going to do? Well, you're going to look for people, birds of a feather flock together. You're going to look for people who have similar things, and so you're going to begin. And so it seems that this connection was repeated after their exile in areas of their resettlement. So what happens is they were close when they lived in the land, and when they were exiled, they began to get close together again in resettlement. And that's why the identity of the Frisians must be closely linked with that of people who invaded and settled the British Isles. And the reason for that is that you had the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh that started, obviously, in the British Isles. Now we know Manasseh's more so here, but Ephraim more in the British Isles because of the whole promise. But we understand that that's where they came from. So if they're identified with Manasseh, guess what? Manasseh went into the British Isles, most of Manasseh ended up here in the United States. So let's look at the descendants of Zebulun. And we're just going to pull, now all these things we've looked at, now we're going to pull in the strings. You have the Sabalingoi of Frisia. You have the Yali in the Hali people of Jutland, which, by the way, is Denmark. If you were looking at ancient maps, you will see Denmark is called Jutland, which is kind of interesting because you know that you can transpose the J to a Y, Jutland. You have Sured, son of Zebulun, was ancestor of the Suardini, located between the Don And that's not vulgar. That should be Volga. Rivers. By the way, my computer must learn some spelling because vulgar isn't even spelled like that. But they changed Volga to vulgar.
They think they know it all.
Yep, I know. Listen, I don't know about you, but I want real intelligence, not AI, okay? Because AI doesn't just, sometimes AI can't spell. Number 4, the Sarmatai. And you had the Sarmatai. Then they were a descendant of Zebulun. And then they re-emerged. In other words, they were in exile. Then they migrated. And all of a sudden, they went from here to here. And then they re-emerged as the Suardenoi in Sweden. So they showed up in Sweden. And fifthly, you had the Slabi of the Netherlands, Netherlands, the Netherlands. So you had the Netherlands. So what are you seeing? Well, Holland, that's where many of the tribe, members of the tribe, the descendants of the tribe of Zebulun end up. You had Sered, son of Zebulun, was also found in Holland. So his descendants. Now, Elon, who is also a son of Zebulun, actually is seen in the names of Holland and Norway's, Norway, Holland, and the Allens. Because Elons, very similar. And the name of Elon is also seen in Halland in Sweden. Because, again, and I'm going to keep repeating this so you'll see it, one of the ways that you can trace the tribes is because they had a habit as they moved. Guess what they did? They stamped their name, some form of their name, on all the places they went. And some of them we can pick up more easily, but you can see it here. You can see it here, particularly in the tribe of Dan, you really see it easily. But there are others. And the tribe of Allens, whose descendants are part of the population of modern Finland. Finland. And then again, you have Elon, became the Alans and the Alamans, who settled in Alsace in France. Now here's a connection. These are the kind of things that when I see them, I go, wow. Because we've said what? We said that the 10 tribes were exiled. It wasn't just the 10 tribes, because there were parts from the other tribes as well. That we know that before Jerusalem fell to the Babylonians, there were parts of Judah that fell to the Assyrians as well. But what happens is that they were exiled to Hala Haber, okay? And we know that because the Bible says that's where he took them. That's where the Assyrian king took them and dumped them over there. Well, this is what is so interesting, and this is when you're doing tracing and you have one of those aha moments. Wow. So you know that's where they started. And then we know they ended up as the Allens and Alamans, and they end up in France, and they end up in Finland, and they end up in Norway and Sweden and Holland. But when you look at this, the Almani may have been named after Alaman. Now here's the aha moment, which was the Assyrian name for Hala, H-A-L-A-H. So they're living here, and what do you think? Okay, they put him in Hala. So they called the tribe, they called them because they're living there. So when they put the Israelites out of the northern kingdom of Israel, they put them in Hala and Eber. Well, the ones that were in Hala, and we know that's where the tribe of Zebulun primarily were put. And they called them what? Almonds, almonds, almonds. Why? Because you're Halas. So guess what? You have generation after generation, and they start moving, and they have now called themselves what? Almonds. Why? Because that's what the Assyrians called them. Can you imagine if you're 2-3 generations and a foreign people has control over you? They've exiled you. You're not in your culture. You're not speaking your language. Your children are not speaking your language. The grandchildren, and they pointed at you and called Almonds, Almonds. Now, true, when we read in the Bible, it's Hala, but Hala, Alamon was the name for Hala. So, you Halas, you're Alamons. So you move, and what happens? By the time you are migrating, you're calling yourself what? What your enemy called you, Alamons. That's us, we're Alamons. And so just so to prove to you I'm telling you the truth, in 2 Kings, chapter 17, 6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, that was the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, and carried Israel away to Assyria and placed them in Hala, and by the Habor, the river of Goshen, and in the city of the Medes. So we know right away what? They were in the land of modern-day Iran. Now, the tribe of Zebulun in the land of Israel, we're going to see, is there any similarities between the tribe of Zebulun when they were in Israel, the northern kingdom, or any other time? So, the tribe of Zebulun, when they were in the land of Israel, they were engaged in the purple dye industry. And I want to talk a little bit about the purple dye industry. Anybody read anywhere in the New Testament someone who was involved in the purple dye industry? Okay, I heard that lady, and you're right, that lady. That lady who was a convert of the Apostle Paul, Lydia. She was a seller of purple. Now, why do we know that Lydia was very wealthy? She was a very wealthy businesswoman. Because purple was a very, very expensive dye. Because you have to get it off of mollusk from the sea, and you got to you get just a little bit, and it's very expensive because you only get a little bit, and then you got to get a lot to have that purple. And so if you were a seller of purple, meaning you were selling purple garments, then they were very expensive. And so the people of Zebulun were engaged in that industry. That was one of the things they did. They were also involved in the making of white glass making, and in fishing. Now, and I went on, purple dye was produced from a sea mollusk, and it's a very complicated chemical process to extract that purple dye from this mollusk. And it's very complicated. And then the dye was applied to textiles in a manner that required expertise. Why? Because you don't want your purple garment to fade the first time you put it on. And understand, we're talking about in the area of BC. Because the northern kingdom fell in 722 BC, so we're talking about before 722 BC, so they were involved in this. And it required expertise to know how to do this. Here's what's interesting. Do you carry these skills? Yes, as they're moving, that expertise is what? Passed down. We don't see it a great deal today, but you know, there are certain businesses that are passed down from fathers to sons to grandsons, and different businesses. One of two businesses that I think of from my own hometown. Kennedy's Bakery, that is still run by Kennedy's, and Theo's, that is still run by Theodosopoulos Granitsas. Okay? Now it's gone into great-grandchildren, I think. Yeah. But, so it's passed down. And I can tell you, pretty much the conies at Theo's, which at one time was called Coney Island, taste just about the way they did when I was a child. And some of the stuff at Kennedy's tastes the same as it was when I was a child. Why is that? Now I want to show you something. There was some expertise that was passed down from generation to generation to generation. You don't find that in a lot of things, but some things you do. One of the best pizzas here in town. Now you may disagree, but Pizza Oven, Papa Bear's. Okay. Okay. And by the way, I am not getting any money in my hand from Papa Bear's, Pizza Oven, Kennedy's, or Theo's, or Coney Island, or the Forum, or anything. I'm just giving you that it's been passed down. So in the same way, what happened? Well, they took the expertise as they moved, and they passed it on to their children, and their children's children, and their children's children. And guess what? Modern Holland is prominent today in both the chemical, CHEMICAL, and textile industries, TEXTILE. And this is what's interesting. The tribe of Zebulun also, all the way back in the northern kingdom of Israel, were experts in metallurgy, as best they knew back there. I mean, obviously it was a little bit different than today, but they were still experts. And so the production of white glass uses what are considered to be metallurgical principles. And the people of Holland are known for their skill in metallurgy. So what do you see? You see it. I don't care if they were in Israel and then they were in Hala. But they get into Holland and they're doing the same thing, and they have the same talents and the same innate abilities. Now, fishing is important in the present Dutch economy. So fishing is a big thing in the Dutch economy. And at least, in some parts of Holland it's higher percentage, but at least 25% of the inhabited land of Holland has been reclaimed from the sea. What I mean by that is it was underwater. It was underwater, and that's 1/4. Can you imagine reclaiming 1/4 of the land of a country from the sea? So they basically have gone and reclaimed that land from the sea, and they're living in houses on land that has been reclaimed from the sea. We have to stop there. So next week then we'll talk about, we haven't finished everything yet, so we need to know some. We're going to look at did this group of people go anywhere from Holland? Did they keep migrating? I will tell you, yes, they did. And I will tell you this. God said? He said, I'm going to what? I'm going to scatter you to the ends of the earth. And I will tell you that the tribe of Zebulun has been scattered even beyond Holland. And right away, your brain will probably go to some of the geography that you remember from decades ago. Oh, I know about places, and they have certain names. Oh, guess what? Descendants of the tribe of Zebulun are ending up in the uttermost parts of the earth. Because God said, I'm going to scatter you. And guess what they do? They just take their expertise and, because why? And he said, you'll be a blessing. You're going to be in exile, but guess what? You're going to be a blessing. And as they migrate, they've been a blessing. Okay. Any questions or comments about the tribe of Zebulun? About how many are beginning to see that God's plan is a whole lot bigger than what we can even imagine? And guess what? He has a plan for us. He has a plan for me, and he has a plan for you. If you're out there and you have comments or questions, I would love to hear from you, whether you're local or whether you're thousands of miles away. And I do want to announce something to you who are watching, and it doesn't matter, actually it doesn't matter where in the world you are and where in the country you are. We are planning a 2024 trip to Israel, the Holy Land. We will also be going and spending a day at Petra in Jordan. If you've read your Bible, you know that there is an awesome event that's going to take place in the area of Petra. And we would love to have you come along with us. We're doing something unique this time. We're making all of our arrangements directly with Israel. We would love to have you join us, and I will tell you that within the next couple weeks, we will be announcing an information meeting. We will also have some information in a couple weeks that will be up on our website where you can do everything, including enrolling for the trip online. And so it doesn't matter where you are. You're in a place called Timbuktu. You can go and we'll meet you in Israel, but we would love to have you come with us. We are going all the way from the north in Israel all the way through the central part of Israel to a lot in the south. So you're going to see all of Israel, and we will take it at a pace that is comfortable, and we want you to come with us. So if you're interested, if you can call and give your name and address at the operator at the church, and you can just drop a message and send it. You can drop off your gift in response to the teaching you've received, and you can put that note in our Dropbox. However you want to let us know. Questions, comments about the teaching. Also, if you are interested in joining us on this trip of a lifetime, our seating is limited, but we want to take as many people as we can who want to go. So I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in tonight. And know this, we love you. We care about you. That's why we want to give you the Word of God. And so if it has been a blessing to you, would you please let us know? And we'll be back here next week looking at you. We're looking at you. You see us, and by faith we see all of you watching at home.